Plessy v. Ferguson, Supreme Court Case 1896. Plessy v. Ferguson is a landmark Supreme Court case in 1896 that upheld racial segregation laws for public facilities under the doctrine of separate but equal. According to Hoffer, they, a group of like-minded, similarly situated individuals in New Orleans known as Afro-Creoles, arranged to have Plessy arrested for violating Louisiana's Separate Car Act so that he would be able to challenge the law in the court. Plessy was an American shoemaker and civil rights activist. In the late 19th century, racial segregation was common in the southern United States. Separate Car Act in Louisiana required separate railway cars for blacks and whites. Homer Plessy, who was part white and part black, was arrested for sitting in a white-only car. Plessy was one-eighth black and not distinguishable from any other white man. Plessy's act of civil disobedience in 1892 was a strategic move to challenge the constitutionality of segregation laws. After being arrested, Plessy was convicted of violating the Separate Car Act. He appealed the case, which eventually reached the Supreme Court. The legal battle highlighted the tensions and contradictions within segregation laws. On May 18, 1896, the Supreme Court delivered a 7-1 decision in favor of Ferguson. Justice Henry Billings Brown wrote the majority opinion, which held the racial segregation laws did not violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The court held that racial segregation in the railway did not deny equal protection to the laws. The ruling established the doctrine of separate but equal, which stated that segregation was permissible as long as the facilities for blacks and whites were equal. The separate but equal doctrine justified many discriminatory practices for decades. The 14th Amendment was firmly established with the separate but equal interpretation of the law because of Plessy v. Ferguson set the precedent. Plessy v. Ferguson legitimized state law reestablishing racial segregation and disenfranchising Black Americans. In 1927, the Supreme Court upheld segregation in the case Gong Lum v. Rice, based on Plessy v. Ferguson. The separate but equal doctrine remained in effect until it was overturned by Brown v. Board of Education in 1954. In 1954, the Supreme Court decision in Brown v. Board of Education declared that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, effectively overturning Plessy v. Ferguson and making the beginning of the end for legalized segregation at the elementary and high school level. According to Ashford Hansard, Singer, Hayton, and William, even though the Brown decision imposed a legal mandate, some school districts failed to embrace a universal moral imperative. They agreed in principle but not in practice, which may warrant the change has not been exhaustive or substantial. Today, we recognize the shadows of this landmark decision, Plessy v. Ferguson, remain, although public schools were declared legally desegregated. Plessy v. Ferguson was a pivotal case in American history, since it set the precedent for segregation as long as it was equal. It promoted racial segregation and inequality, but also set the stage for future civil rights victories.